There's a moment of incredible power that often goes unnoticed, not because it's loud, but because it's silent. It's the moment when you finally back off, when you stop texting first, when you stop explaining yourself. When you stop overextending, proving, fixing, chasing. You don't do it with drama or anger. You do it with quiet conviction, with grace, with strength, because you've realized that your value is not proven through persistence. It's revealed through your absence. And when you do this, something begins to shift. That's when the energy changes. That's when the other side begins to lean in. That's when they start to step forward. You see, most people are stuck in a pattern, pouring energy into something or someone that isn't meeting them halfway. They believe that if they give more, they'll finally be seen, heard, or chosen. But the truth is, value is not proven by giving more. It's shown when you pull back, when you no longer participate in imbalance. When you stop trying to force outcomes, that is when the shift happens. That is when the other side feels the void and is forced to confront what your presence once offered so freely. When you finally back off, it's not weakness. It's power. It's not an act of revenge or manipulation. It's a decision rooted in self-worth. For so long, you may have been conditioned to believe that effort equals love, that trying harder brings you closer to the connection you desire. But somewhere along the way, you began to realize that pouring more of yourself into someone who gives less doesn't bring you peace. It brings you depletion. That moment you decide to back off, to stop initiating, to stop overgiving, is not the moment you lose anything. It's the moment you reclaim yourself. Backing off sends a silent but powerful message. I know what I bring. I don't have to prove it anymore. It's a declaration that you trust in your value so deeply, you're no longer available for one-sided efforts. You're no longer waiting around for someone else to catch up, show up, or step up. Instead, you're choosing to conserve your energy for people, spaces, and experiences that reflect back the respect and reciprocity you've always deserved. It's not about withdrawing in anger, it's about pulling back in wisdom. Because maturity teaches you that what's forced will never truly fulfill you, and what's meant for you will never require you to beg for it. In the silence that follows your decision to back off, a powerful shift happens. Not just in the dynamic, but within you. You start to breathe differently. You stop checking your phone. You stop trying to decode mixed signals. Your nervous system settles because you're no longer entangled in emotional guessing games. You begin to reconnect with your own voice, your own desires, your own center. And that shift in energy is unmistakable. People feel it. They feel the change even if they can't explain it. Your absence speaks volumes where your words no longer needed to. What surprises most people is what happens next. The one you backed off from begins to feel the void. Not because you disappeared with rage or slammed the door, but because your presence is no longer filling the space for them. They start to notice the gap you once filled with your care, your consistency, your effort. They may not say it, but they feel it, and that absence causes reflection. Reflection leads to awareness, and sometimes awareness leads to action. Because suddenly they're confronted with a question they never had to ask before. Was I giving enough? Did I meet them where they were? Why did they stop trying? Backing off realigns you with your power. It places responsibility back where it belongs, and whether or not someone else chooses to step forward isn't even the point anymore. Because in choosing to stop proving your worth, you've already won. You've shifted the focus back to the only place it ever truly belonged, you. When you decide to stop chasing, stop reaching, and stop filling all the space in a connection, your silence suddenly becomes the loudest thing in the room. You don't have to yell, beg, or explain. The shift in your energy says everything you were once trying so hard to articulate. Your withdrawal, not in anger but in calm certainty, communicates something far more impactful than any argument ever could. You've outgrown proving yourself. That silence is heavy, not with resentment, but with strength. It's the sound of a woman who no longer pleads to be heard because she has chosen to hear herself first. People underestimate the weight of your absence until it's no longer there to rely on. The space you held, the energy you gave, the emotional labor you offered, it all becomes more visible the moment you stop showing up in the way they were used to. Your silence forces others to sit with themselves, with their own contributions, their own patterns, and sometimes their own guilt. It becomes a mirror, and not everyone is ready to face what's in it, but those who are, those who truly care, Begin to feel the tension of that silence not as punishment, but as a wake-up call. You see, when you were always the one reaching out, following up, initiating repair, there was no urgency on the other side. You were cushioning the emotional fall every time. You were giving second, third, and fourth chances. Your presence was constant, and in that consistency it was easy to take you for granted. But the moment you go quiet, not cold, just still, the energy dynamic shifts. Now the space feels different. Your voice isn't there to reassure, to soften, to soothe. And that difference can be felt on a level deeper than words. The truth is, people hear your silence long after your words would have faded. Words can be ignored, argued with, misunderstood. Silence, it echoes. It lingers, it invites introspection. When you back off and choose to stay quiet instead of defending or pleading, you give the other person room to experience consequence, not punishment, just the natural result of your healthy boundary. And in many cases, that's what finally gets their attention. That's when they start asking themselves, why did the energy change? Or why does this suddenly feel empty? But by then, you're no longer waiting for that realization. Your silence wasn't meant to manipulate. It was meant to protect your peace. It was a final act of self-trust. It was you saying, without saying it, if you want to meet me now, you'll have to come forward. I'm no longer doing the dance alone. And that silence becomes your most powerful statement because it doesn't seek validation. It commands respect. When you back off, what you're really doing is creating space, not just physical space, but emotional and energetic space. This space is where everything becomes visible. It's where truth has room to surface. When you were filling every silence, soothing every conflict, and bridging every gap, there was no room for the other person to take responsibility, reflect, or engage from a place of intention. But now that you've stepped back, there is a noticeable void. That absence creates contrast. It reveals exactly what your presence used to hold, and forces others to recognize the emotional weight you carried all along. This space often feels uncomfortable at first, especially if you've been the consistent giver. You're used to jumping in, fixing things, maintaining harmony, but the beauty of this discomfort is that it acts as a teacher. It teaches you how to let go of control, how to be okay without constant interaction, how to stay still without seeking validation. And while you're learning to sit in your own power, others are learning what it feels like without your constant presence. That's when accountability is born. That's when they begin to feel your worth, not because you demanded it, but because they now have to experience life without your energy. When you no longer show up to keep the connection alive, they are left with a choice: step forward and meet you with the same energy, or allow the silence to grow. That moment of decision is critical. It's the fork in the road that determines whether the connection was one-sided or capable of evolving. But no matter what the outcome, the real gift is that you are no longer the one doing all the emotional heavy lifting. You're no longer stuck in cycles of trying to earn affection or prove your loyalty. The space you've created has now become your protection, in your power. Clarity thrives in the spaces we once feared. And by backing off, you give both parties the opportunity to see things clearly. Maybe for the first time. For the one on the other end, that clarity often comes as a shock. They may realize how much they relied on you to carry the weight of communication, consistency, or emotional connection. They may finally feel the absence of what you gave so freely, and in that awareness some will begin to rise. They'll step forward, they'll make the effort, others won't. But the beauty is you'll finally know, without chasing, without begging, without doubting. That clarity, born from the space you created, is one of the greatest gifts of backing off. It's the moment when everything that was murky becomes transparent, when the truth of who's really meant to show up does so, not because you asked, but because they chose to. And in that choice, everything changes. When you back off, something beautiful begins to happen internally. You start to reclaim the energy you once scattered in every direction but inward. You realize how much of your strength was spent trying to hold something together that was never supposed to be forced. And with every moment you don't reach out, every text you don't send, every situation you don't try to fix, you grow stronger. Not louder, not colder, just clearer. You begin to reconnect with the person you were before you became consumed with someone else's potential. the one who didn't wait for a response to feel validated, the one who didn't shrink to fit into someone else's uncertainty. This withdrawal isn't just about distance, it's about recentering. When you step back, you get to see where you've been overgiving, over-explaining, or overcompensating. And that awareness is powerful. You begin to build new emotional muscles. You say no more easily. You sit with discomfort without reacting. You understand that your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. You no longer beg for effort. You no longer mistake inconsistency for chemistry. You finally understand that your peace is far too expensive to be traded for temporary attention or confused affection. In this process, something else awakens: self-trust. The more you hold your ground, the more you realize that what you feared, being forgotten, being left, was never as scary as betraying yourself. You no longer betray your intuition just to keep a connection alive. You no longer override your boundaries just to keep someone comfortable. Backing off gives you the perspective to see that anyone who truly values you will step forward without being chased, and if they don't, that's clarity, not loss. You also start to attract differently. You stop resonating with mixed signals and emotional immaturity. Your new energy doesn't match confusion anymore. You stop feeding dynamics that drain you. And in doing so, you create room for healthier conversations, aligned connections, and people who don't need to be convinced to show up. When you are at peace with walking away from anything that no longer serves your growth, you stop fearing distance. You begin to see it as a filter that reveals who's real and who only stayed because of your constant effort. This isn't about playing games. It's not about silence to manipulate. It's about detaching with dignity. It's about stepping back so that someone else has the chance to step forward. And most of all, it's about reminding yourself that you never had to chase what was meant for you. You just had to stop running after what wasn't. When you stop showing up out of habit and start choosing where your energy goes with intention, the entire dynamic shifts, not just in your relationships, but within you. Backing off teaches you something you can't learn when you're always the one reaching. It teaches you who shows up when you don't. It reveals the truth in a way words never could. Because when you step back without drama, without warning, just with clarity, you allow the real to remain and the false to fall away. And while that may sound simple, it takes immense courage. It takes a heart that has learned to love itself enough to no longer beg for what should be freely given. In that sacred pause, you begin to reestablish emotional balance. You are no longer the sole force keeping a connection alive. You stop pushing, you stop initiating, you stop over-explaining, and in that stillness you find your center again. You notice how peaceful life feels when you're not constantly seeking approval or chasing closure. You no longer feel exhausted by trying to be understood. Instead, you feel empowered by your ability to understand yourself. That shift is everything. It's where healing happens. It's where self-respect is built. Backing off also opens the door to a higher level of emotional intelligence. You stop reacting and start responding to your needs, to the situation, to the truth of what's unfolding. You realize that sometimes space isn't a punishment, it's a powerful teacher. It teaches you what's real, it teaches the other person accountability, and most importantly, it teaches you how to sit in your worth even when no one else is affirming it, because your value doesn't fluctuate based on someone else's recognition. It stands strong, even in silence. You may be surprised when the person you backed off from begins to reach out again, not because you demanded it, but because they felt the absence of something real. This isn't about playing hard to get. It's about becoming hard to forget, not because you're elusive, but because your energy, your presence, and your love had depth, and that depth becomes unforgettable once it's gone. When someone realizes they no longer have effortless access to your heart, it forces them to reflect, adjust, or retreat. Either way, you've won, because you've stopped fighting for a place that should have been honored without a fight. Ultimately, backing off doesn't mean you've stopped caring. It means you've started caring about yourself more. You've chosen peace over pressure, self-worth over desperation, power over pursuit. And when that shift happens, the world responds. Those meant to rise to meet you will, those who never intended to won't, and either way you finally feel free, because you no longer need to chase what you were always meant to receive. There's a remarkable transformation that happens when you stop showing up out of fear. Fear of losing someone, fear of being forgotten, fear of being alone. The moment you back off, not with resentment but with quiet certainty, you allow yourself to breathe outside of the pressure to prove, to fix, or to maintain something on your own. And in that space, something profound begins to happen. You elevate. You rise out of emotional survival and step into emotional sovereignty. You're no longer driven by the urge to keep someone's attention. You are led by the knowing that the right ones will stay, step up, and meet you without being chased. As you continue to hold that space, you start to see patterns more clearly, especially your own. You recognize where you used to abandon yourself in the name of love. You become aware of how often you overextended just to hold something together that should have never been built on your sacrifice. And that awareness is painful at first, but it's also the beginning of deep healing, because when you see your part in the imbalance, you also see your power to change it. Backing off gives you the emotional distance to rewire your responses. It teaches you to trust in divine timing, not immediate validation, and while you're evolving, the other person feels the shift. What once felt easy, your constant presence, your predictable effort, is now missing. They feel the absence of your energy, and it creates a tension they can't ignore. They start asking questions they never had to ask before. Where did that warmth go? Why do things feel different? They notice that something has changed, but they can't quite define it. That's when curiosity kicks in, and curiosity is the beginning of pursuit. But now the pursuit comes from them, not you, because you've finally stopped filling the space, and they have to decide whether or not they're willing to. Backing off is not about creating distance to punish someone. It's about creating distance to protect your peace. And ironically, it's in that space of stillness and detachment that your energy becomes magnetic. You're no longer overgiving, and that balance makes you unshakably attractive, not just to others, but to your own soul. You like who you're becoming, you're proud of your growth, you're no longer caught up in someone else's pace. You're walking your own, and the ones who are meant to walk with you will feel that energy and step forward, not because you asked, but because you let go. So when you finally back off and they begin to step forward, it's not by accident, it's the natural reaction to your energetic transformation. They feel what you're no longer saying, they sense the shift in power, and they respond to it. Not all will, but those who are ready, who are aligned, who truly see you. They'll make the move, not because you pulled away with strategy, but because you finally stood still in your truth. And that is what draws everything real back toward you. Backing off isn't about giving up. It's about choosing yourself first. It's the decision to no longer exhaust your emotional reserves in places where effort is one-sided. For far too long, you may have been stuck in a cycle of proving, fixing, and over-delivering, thinking that your consistency would make someone wake up. But the truth is, your value was never something to be earned through effort. It was always there, it just needed space to be recognized, and the moment you step back is the moment that recognition becomes possible, not through noise, but through the silence that speaks volumes. What many never understand is that your withdrawal doesn't stem from weakness or bitterness. It stems from strength. It is quiet but powerful. It's not reactive, it's intentional. You back off because you've finally learned that someone who truly values you won't need to be pushed to show up. And if they do step forward, it won't be because you chased, it'll be because you didn't. When you stop reaching and start observing, you see the truth clearly, who is willing to meet you where you are and who only stayed because you carried the weight for both of you. In that sacred stillness, you begin to rise, you get reacquainted with yourself, the version of you that existed before you made someone else's inconsistency a personal project. You find peace not in the return of someone else, but in the return of your own emotional clarity. Your heart feels lighter, your mind sharper, and your boundaries stronger. You no longer seek to force what's not flowing. You no longer crave what confuses you. You begin to attract not from a place of lack, but from alignment. You stop fearing what walks away and start trusting what stays without effort. And something incredible happens in that process. People feel the shift. They notice the gap your energy once filled. Some may panic and rush to reconnect. Others may fall away, but either way, the truth becomes undeniable. Your presence was never ordinary, it was powerful, and when you stop giving it freely, it becomes unforgettable. That's when those who once hesitated begin to step forward. Not out of guilt, but out of realization, and you no longer need that to feel whole. You've found enough in yourself to not need someone else's presence to define your worth. In the end, backing off isn't about waiting for someone to return. It's about returning to yourself. It's about standing so deeply in your own value that anything not rooted in mutual respect simply can't stay. And when someone does step forward, not because you chase them, but because you let go with grace, you'll know it's real. Because it wasn't coerced, it was chosen, and that makes all the difference. You backed off not to punish, but to protect your peace, and that choice changed everything. If today's message resonated with you, if it reminded you of your strength, your worth, or your power to choose peace over pressure, then I want you to carry that energy forward. You are not here to chase, to convince, or to prove. You are here to stand rooted in your truth and let everything meant for you meet you there. Thank you for showing up not just for this message, but for yourself. It takes courage to choose silence when noise feels easier. It takes maturity to back off with grace instead of anger, and it takes deep self-love to let go of what doesn't match your growth. I see your strength even if others didn't, and now that you've seen it too, there's no going back. Keep honoring that quiet power. Let your energy speak louder than your words ever could, and trust what's real will always find you again. Until next time, take care of your heart, stand tall in your worth, and never forget. You're not here to be chosen. You're here to choose you. Thank you and goodbye.